Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Maverick Mindsets. Today, I have a hugely inspirational guest on my podcast, none other than Alex Bard. He's a seasoned serial entrepreneur who has founded and sold 4 companies in the tech space. He's previously been listed as one of the rising stars in Forbes magazine, highlighting his successes and approach to life and business. Along the way, Alex has built relationships with some of the world's best-known entrepreneurs, such as Sir Richard Branson, Mark Cuban, and Mark Benioff. Nowadays, Alex is managing director at Redpoint Ventures, a venture capital firm based on the West Coast in the USA, where he invests in companies that he believes can grow to be unicorns. A highly articulate, engaging, approachable, and authentic guy, listen to Alex share his secret sauce for success, where we talk about the qualities he looks for in founding entrepreneurs, the importance of the business proposition and the market they operate in. We talk about the characteristics of being curious and single-minded, and why being a great storyteller is vital to get ahead in today's commercial world. The podcast is peppered with honest maverick examples of how to set yourself apart in business, and perhaps most interestingly, how to go from good to great. It was a real pleasure speaking with this guy, and I'm personally learned so much myself. Now let's take a listen, and I guarantee there will be some gems of information and key takeaways for you that will be both inspiring and rewarding. And now I bring you Alex Bard. So Alex, welcome to the Maverick Mindsets podcast. Real privilege to have you on the show. I know my listeners are going to be really enthralled with your story. Now, I must admit to the listeners that I've known Alex for probably 25 years, maybe getting on.
Yeah, amazing. Time flies.
Time flies.
It's been my privilege, matey.
Thank you very much. During that time, I've obviously seen you go through your whole entrepreneurial journey from the start through to where you are today. And on the face of it, you have done the American dream. You've built from nothing and you've become phenomenally successful. So just to start, kind of frame that up, just give us a sense of what that journey was, how it started, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with my parents, actually, because as you know this part of my story, a lot of people don't actually, but I was born in Russia, and we immigrated to America when I was 6 years old. And we came here, didn't speak the language. My parents didn't know anybody. They came with, effectively the equivalent of $100 and 2 suitcases and a 6-year-old son to figure it out. And, the question is, why did they do that? And a lot of that had to do with, religious persecution in Russia and sort of limited opportunity. My dad is very driven and has a strong belief system around wrong or right. And they were concerned, not as much for themselves, actually. They had quite a good life, to be honest, in spite of all of that. But they were more concerned about how I would grow up and what my opportunity would be. And so they sacrificed everything and left.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a huge risk to take.
Huge. Right? I mean, I think before I knew what the word entrepreneurship meant, I mean, effectively, that is the greatest level of entrepreneurship and risk you can take, is giving everything up and sort of plunging yourself into this direction because you believe in something so strongly. And I think that was and continues to be a huge motivation for me for why I work as hard as I do, and the way that I make decisions and first principles and the values that I want to instill in my kids. And so we came here, and they worked really hard and created an environment where I had a lot more opportunity than they did. And my path sort of early on to build on top of what they had done and sort of stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, was the finance path. That is the path that I thought that I would take.
Yep.
And so I studied finance. I was passionate about it. I loved what numbers and data can tell you about a business or a market or an opportunity. And my dream job was I grew up in New York. My dream job was to get a job on Wall Street, because that felt like the epicenter of opportunity in kind of the early 90s. And fortunately I did. And I would commute into the city, and I worked in 2 World Trade on the 73rd floor.
Okay.
which was incredible. I just felt this amazing energy coming up out of the ground of opportunity. And that really, I think, fulfilled the left brain part of me, which I get from my dad. The right brain part, which I get from my mom, which is like this very creative, curious part of my brain, at the same time was being starved because you don't have that opportunity on Wall Street. And a good friend of mine from junior high school, and college, who was a brilliant engineer, called me and said, hey, why don't you come over and join me at this startup doing this internet thing? And in the mid 90s, the internet was like this nascent, brand new thing. People were connecting via AOL and dial up. And, I guess I said, why not? And, that sort of kind of maybe a first lesson, which is like my parents before me at a very different scale. I took the risk of leaving the thing that I'd been building towards because I recognized that I was being suffocated and wanted to, go somewhere else and take this risk in startups. And that started my entrepreneurial journey. Started 4 companies as part of that. I won't bore you with the details of all those with varying degrees of...
Which will be in the show notes, by the way, folks. I'll put those in for you.
Varying degrees of success. The last one of those companies I was CEO of was acquired by Salesforce.com, which was a company I really looked up to in 2011. I was fortunate in that, the team and Mark saw something in me and promoted me to executive vice president and GM of the second largest business. And, I got to really learn from the execs at Salesforce at the time, which was incredible, what scale looked like, ran a $1.5 billion business. And after that, went into the venture side. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've been doing venture at Redpoint, investing in early stage companies for the last 8 years or so.
And amazing. And how did you switch from, I guess, running a business to then selling that business to a big corporate? Mm-hmm. Was that must have been a big mindset shift for you?
Yeah, it was, look, I think part of the calculus for selling at that time was that it was the culmination of a lot of other work and effort that would result in a life-changing outcome that I could then use to, sort of pay back the debt I had accumulated in my brain for the sacrifice my parents made. And to be able to buy them a home and kind of do all these things that really mattered a lot to me and set up my family for the future. Sure. And that was certainly part of the calculus. The other part of the calculus is all the startups that I've been part of, I really learned by making mistakes. Okay. And this was an opportunity to join a company, and in SaaS and CRM specifically, customer relationship management, which is a category that I was building companies in. There was no bigger, more important company than Salesforce. And this felt like an opportunity to learn from someone for the first time, like intimately, directly about what real scale looks like. And that was really exciting and thrilling for me. I'm innately curious and I love to learn. And so that was the other part of the calculus. And so, we just joined Salesforce and learned a lot in the 3.5 years that I was there.
Great. And then moving on to venture capital, just give us a sense of the moving parts of a venture capital business. So in my simple way, you've got 2 sides. You go out and raise a fund. So you're selling your past success and forward vision to people who put money in a pot that you then go and invest. Then you've got to go and find a ton of businesses that you believe with a certain amount of measured risk will be successful. And at the end of it, you hope you get on the right side of success. Is that a good appraisal of what venture is?
It is. And venture is actually quite nuanced depending at what stage you invest. So, are you an angel investor? That's venture. And that's very different. Are you a seed investor, which is like, the first oftentimes institutional round, or are you a Series A and, sort of beyond? And depending on the stage where you invest, that influences how you think about returns. That influences how you think about how big of a fund you raise. That influences how you think about the companies and risk that you're willing to take. So it's actually quite nuanced. I didn't understand it nearly as well as I do now, having been in it for 8 years, and I'm still, learning quite a bit. I mean, I think the hardest part of where we invest, we predominantly invest at the seed and Series A. That's one fund at Redpoint, and we've just raised our 10th vintage. It's a $650 million fund, and then we have another fund that is a growth fund, which invests at the Series B and C and beyond, and that's a very different calculus for how you invest there. And that's a $750 million fund. I spend all my time at early because I'm just passionate about helping founders at the earliest stages build companies. But, I think the interesting part of the job is you have to sort of discern good from great. Most of the companies that walk in the door that I'll have met will have come by way of somebody that I have respect for introducing me, whether it's another entrepreneur, whether it's a firm that invested before we did, and I know that firm well, and they've recommended that company based on its momentum and founders, or some other way. So there's already a baseline when I'm meeting founders that there's a reasonable belief that they could be successful.
Yeah.
And then for us, the hard part is many of them are going to be good companies. We, by virtue of a $650 million fund, and we're going to invest in maybe 25, 30 companies out of that fund, have to believe that the companies we invest in can be multi-billion dollar companies.
Yeah.
And so you have to look for great. And that's hard. I mean, I'll give you this quick calculus and we can move on. But I personally will meet with on the order of magnitude of 500 to 600 new companies a year.
Wow.
And I will invest.
Do you mean almost face to face or through Zoom? I mean,
Zoom, face to face, but like a real interaction.
Yeah, sure.
Not an email introduction, but like actually, a 30 to a 1 hour session to get to know the founders, their vision, the product, the market opportunity, their capital requirements, etc.
Yeah.
And we'll probably invest in 1 to 2.
Wow.
I mean, that's the funnel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. So the journey of the entrepreneurs pitching to you, the chance of success is minimal for them even. And obviously the chance of you pick back in the right horse, one would hope you get it right more than you get it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. So, and by the way, there's a lot of venture firms, right? When you're a founder, and I used to be on the founder side, so I remember this intimately. We pitched, I think when we raised money for Assistly, that was the company that Salesforce.com acquired. Our first round, I think we pitched 35, 40 VCs, and I think we got 1 or 2 yeses.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving you my journey, but that founder is going to pitch a lot of different firms. And so their success rate is better than, 500 to 1.
Yeah.
And that, where people decide to invest is sort of determined on a variety of different vectors, and we can sort of talk about that too.
Which is really interesting, because I've always wondered, how do you decide if you've got 600 interactions? How do you decide? It must come down to obviously the people, but where they are with what they're doing, the market, how mature they've got to. What are some of those things that do you literally speak to someone, look at the plan, think the timing is perfect, this is a no-brainer, or you've still got to peel back the onion layer and get to the real nub of, well, maybe it's not as good as I thought it was. So
yeah, there's a bunch of sort of thoughts are streaming into my brain. I'll start at the highest level. And this is more specific for early stage. Remember, this is going to be slightly different the later a company gets. At early stage, there's very little data, like real data. Later stage, you have a lot more data on the performance of the business, and you can use financial analysis to kind of like hyper-analyze how that company is performing. And that is an important input into, ultimately investing. For us at the earliest stage, there's very little of that, right? And so really what it kind of comes down to predominantly is 3 things. It's the founding team, and I'll double click on each of these if you're curious.
Yep. It's
the product that they're building, and it's the market.
Yeah.
And so in those 3, in founding team, we're looking for a couple of things. One is, what is the root of the motivation of the founding team, right? Like, what is the passion that is driving it? Like, why is this important to them?
Yeah.
And the reason it's important to understand motivation is because even the companies that are successful are going to have exit paths along the way. Somebody's going to want to come in and buy the company. And you want somebody who's going to look through that, because their drive isn't sort of a short-term financial outcome. It's something more bigger. It's more important. So one part, you want to understand motivation for that. The other part as to why you want to understand motivation is startups, even the ones that from outside look like they're perfectly successful, have so many issues, so many failure points along the way.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that the team that you're investing in, because early on, really, it has so much to do with the team, is going to be able to run through brick walls in the face of, a lot of failure mode. So you want to understand what drives this team and motivation. The other thing you look for in team, at least we do, in a perfect world, is, kind of founder market fit. you've probably heard maybe product market fit. People talk about a lot about that. But founder market fit is like, what is the collective set of experiences that this team has that gives them a unique point of view on how to solve the problem, like practically, not just academically. Doesn't mean you can't be an academic and identify an opportunity in a market and go after it. But if you've lived it, you have kind of a more nuanced view of that opportunity set. So we love when founders have, kind of founder market fit. And then the third piece of the founding part, and then we can go on to product and market, is chemistry. Look, the reality is where we invest, we're going to be on that journey if it works out for 10, 12 years.
Wow, as long as that.
It's a long time, right? The best companies accrue enterprise value in the out years. And so you want to be part of a company for 10 to 12 years because those are the ones that are going to be multi-billion-dollar companies that have an opportunity to go public or be part of a really big acquisition. And so you have to have chemistry with this team, a belief that you can be intellectually honest with them, push them, challenge them, give them real feedback, that they're going to, have their own strong opinions, but be loosely held and be open-minded to that. And so that's another important part. Like sometimes I've had great founders where we had no chemistry. And it didn't feel like we would have a great foundation of trust to be able to build together. And so
So they almost need to be teachable and open to taking on your thoughts and experience.
And it's not taking on my thoughts and experience, because at the end of the day, I have a very clear awareness that it's their company, but they have to be open-minded to inputs.
Yeah.
Because if they're not going to be open-minded to my inputs, and I see, hundreds, if not thousands of companies at different stages and different variants of success, then they're not going to be open-minded to the team that they build. And you want people who are inherently curious and open-minded, but again, strongly opinionated. So that's the kind of the founder bucket. The product bucket is you want to hear a vision for a product that's not incremental to kind of what exists in market, but is fundamentally different. Like they're going to force a customer to choose a version of the world that they believe in. There used to be this woman, Kathy Sierra, I remember when I was a founder, 20 years ago. And she used to say that the products you build, you want people to either love or hate. The place you don't want to be is this kind of middle zone of indifference. And so that really has stayed with me.
A bit like world leaders today.
Yeah, sadly. Or maybe not, actually. Yeah, but you're absolutely right? So, you really want to believe in a product vision that's not incremental, but fundamentally different and will force somebody to love or hate the thing.
Yeah.
And then the last is, you have to understand the size of the market opportunity, right? Because we have to bet on, I mentioned 25 to 30 companies out of a $650 million fund. We've got to return billions, like in the success case. And so you have to believe that every company you invest in can be a multi-billion-dollar company. That is a reflection of the market size. Some markets can support multi-billion-dollar companies by virtue of their size, and some just can't.
Yeah. And
so you have to believe that the market is big enough. One of the people at Redpoint that is, kind of my mentor who brought me into venture capital and taught me a lot, is Satish Dharmaraj. He's been at Redpoint for 15 years. He was a founder before that. And he often says, and this is a Warren Buffett quote, but he always reminds me of this, which is, a good founder meets a bad market. Let me say that again. A good founder meets a bad market. It's usually the market that keeps its reputation. And so you've got to have a point of view on the market. And so those are the three vectors across which we look. And then each investor is sort of nuanced and different. Some, bet more on product. Some bet more on the market opportunity.
Yeah.
For me, it mostly has to do with the founders.
Sure. And what it does make a good entrepreneur.
Yeah. God, it's so many things, Rick. And it's, it's not a scientific mathematical formula, right? I think it's some combination of real passion and intensity for what they're building. It's some part of real curiosity and open-mindedness, because you're going to just learn so much on the journey. It's an important part of it is someone who is a great storyteller. It's so important to be a great storyteller because you have to tell that story to raise capital. You have to tell that story to recruit amazing people into a company. You have to tell that story to get customers. And so somebody who's a really good storyteller, what I mean by that is, the oversimplification of that in my mind is there are two kinds of people: simplifiers and complexifiers. Simplifiers take a complex topic and make it really simple and clear in the fewest words possible and can inspire you through that. Complexifiers speak for a very long time, and at the end of it, you're not entirely sure what they said. Avoid the latter. And so storytelling is an important, kind of part of this, which then leads into recruiting and into, kind of raising capital. And then the last I'd say is you have to be a really good builder. You have to move fast, be like very iterative. You have to be decisive. Decisiveness is critical. It's better to be decisive and make a wrong decision than indecisive, spend a bunch of cycles and make a right one.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that kind of like DNA.
Yeah. And I guess today, the pace of change is ever quicker. So that's vital to not get left behind, or like you say, not be afraid of making those mistakes.
Exactly right. The only advantage startups have over incumbents is speed.
Yes.
And if you don't utilize that advantage, speed of decision making, speed of product building, then you've given up any advantage you might have.
Yeah. And what are some of the key facets that determine success? Once you've invested in that company, it's all going well and the team have got those qualities, what are some of the things you see? Because your job, I guess, from experience, is to be able to look around corners and give that knowledge and experience or inputs to the business. What are some things that generally go wrong or things that they miss?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that, there's almost, this is again an oversimplification. I try to be a simplifier. There's almost two phases of a company, kind of 0 to 1 and then 1 to N. 0 to 1 being the earliest days when you're first like iterating, it's R&D mode, iterating, building the team, building the product, have your vision. You got to move really quickly, get your first few customers on board, like prove that there's product market fit, build momentum. By the way, momentum, I think, is the most important word in business, if not arguably life, because I think momentum is infectious in both directions. You have positive momentum, like, the 1% a day improvement, like what that actually means over a year. And you could have negative momentum. So that momentum early is super important. And that's kind of like the 0 to 1 phase. And in that 0 to 1 phase, the things that make a founding team successful are not necessarily the things that will translate into 1 to N, which is when you get to real scale. And I call that kind of manufacturing mode. Yeah. And so what I mean by that, one example is in those earliest phases, the founding team and the early team, they're like superheroes. They have to wear a superhero cape. They have to do everything. Yeah. They have to do unnatural acts to like make the thing work. Yeah. But those are not the things that necessitate success when you're scaling. When you're scaling, you really have to start to think about what are the systems in place?
Operational.
What are the operations that we need? What's the decision making that we have to push down to people, because you can't sort of be a bottleneck at the top. How do you think about building an organization? Because you go from a small team to a bigger team. And in that transition, how do you enable middle management to be able to have an entrepreneurial spirit and that speed of decision making? Because that's where things start to really slow down. Sure. And so the failure mode that I see from that 0 to 1 and 1 to N, if I were to like narrow it down to one thing, is almost like the failure mode that an incredible individual contributor has in a company when they become a manager. Right? Like you have a brilliant engineer and they become the best engineer in the company. And the natural mode is like, oh, let's promote them to be a manager. Right? And the thing that made them brilliant as an individual contributor, they have to give that up. Yes. The hands on the keyboard. Yeah. And they have to succeed through other people. And it's a different skill set. Yeah. The same is 0 to 1 and 1 to N. The founders who wore this superhero cape to make the unnatural happen have to step back from doing everything and having their hands on the keyboard to leading through a team that they build. Yeah. And some are able to make that transition and see it, and others are not. Sure. And the ones that can't are the ones that don't break out. Yeah. Or have to say, time's up, I'll let someone take this on and build it, and I'll take what I can for now, and I'll go off and do something else. Because some entrepreneurs go from constant startups, build them to a certain level, get bored, move on. Very few can really, if you look at a Jeff Bezos or something for Amazon, I mean, he started it presumably from his parents' garage, but he's now flying spaceships to Mars. So he's been able to work on both through that whole journey, hasn't he? Yeah. And well, so you've just nailed it, Rick. The tough bit is, by and large, the best companies that have really achieved incredible scale are the ones that were run by the founder. Yeah. Not were ones that were started by a founder and then a professional manager came in. Yes. Like that founder energy is so incredibly important. Yeah. Like look at what Elon has done. Look at what Bezos has done. Look at, what Gates did for a very long time before he sort of gave up the reins. Best companies are run by their founders. Sure. And so our job is like, do we believe this person can wear a superhero cape in 0 to 1? and then take the cape off and become a coach, the best coach possible in scaling 1 to N.
Yeah. Fascinating. And what does failure look like in the venture capital world?
Well, yeah, I mean, the failure mode is you don't return the multiples on the fund. And it's hard, actually. It's really, really hard. And, venture capital, it's interesting. It's almost like sports or like a professional athlete to some degree, which is to say that your performance is highly attributable, which is like, you can look at all of the companies that I've personally invested in, the amount of dollars I've deployed into those companies, and what the returns look like. There's no hiding from that.
Yeah,
right? It's like a baseball player.
Yeah.
You can see their exact stats.
Sure.
You can see their batting average, or slugging percentage, or home runs, or stolen bases, and they get paid on their performance.
Yeah.
And venture capital, sort of is the same. You get you get leeway because it takes a while for these things to sort of like ultimately show up in terms of what the returns might start to look like.
Yeah.
But then it is super highly attributable. So the failure mode is, one, you're not delivering results. That's sort of a lagging indicator. The leading indicator is like, there's a lot of them that when you get measured on inputs, how hard are you working? Are you getting in front of the best founders and deals? Are you able to win the right to partner with them? Because, it's not one-sided. The best founders are going to have 20 VCs that want to give them money.
Yeah.
And I've got to compete against 19 others who are in their own right incredibly successful and could add something, to that founder journey. And so the ability to win that founder's trust and be the person they pick to go on the journey with them is critically important. And then, to be helpful to the company as they scale. So like, those are the real, measures, I think, of potential of long-term success, but ultimately it's, what returns are you driving?
Sure. And on your journey, you've obviously met with some of the giants in the entrepreneurial world, people like Richard Branson, Mark Cuban, Mark Benioff, who are incredibly successful in many, many areas of their lives. When you're dealing with people like that, what inspires you about them, and what are some of their, are they superhuman in the way they see things, or are they still just at a more advanced level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nuanced. In my experience, the best founders spike in a particular area, and in that thing, they're superhuman. It's not that they're superhuman across the board and everything.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. But they spike in a particular area, and that is what makes them special.
Yeah.
And so, with Branson, one of the things that I've learned from him through reading the books, but also, as I spent quite a bit of time with him, I've been fortunate to, is he's one of the best brand builders in the world. Mm. And I actually think that now, almost more than ever, brand is critically important for the company you build. And so, he's just been one of the best at it and leveraging that Virgin brand. And so that, that's kind of something that stays with me. From Cuban, I remember he was an investor in one of the companies that I was building. And he really pushed this, get back to sort of the Kathy Sierra love or hate thing. He really pushed on product. We would I remember go and present to him what we were building. And he would ask, well, how does this compare to what's in market? And I'd say something like, well, it's better than this other thing, which was the incumbent. And he would say, some version of, I don't want to hear or est when you sort of speak about your product. I want to hear fuck you. Yeah. What is like fundamentally different that you're doing? And that really, really stayed with me and kind of informs a lot about how I think about product. And Benioff is just, there's a lot of things that he was really and is extraordinary about vision and being able to see the future, but being so deeply connected to the details of sort of the current state. I mean, the business that I ran, he knew more about it at a 1 and zeros level than I did, which is insane because he's running this whole massive company. But the thing I take away from Benioff that was really, I think, impressive to me was he was always able to hire ahead of where that particular leader was going to fail. So he didn't have his executives, like he would see, back to your comment around the corner, and he would see that there would be a point that he would need another executive to be able to, based on experience or whatever else, like run the company to the next stage. And he would hire that person before the person in the current position failed.
Right.
And that was so brilliant. I viewed it as ruthless initially, but then I saw it as like, oh my God, it enables that person to leave while they're successful and start a new chapter elsewhere where they could leverage their skills versus like waiting for them to fail. It creates a very tense environment and slows the company down and all these other things. So he was exceptional at that. And the other thing I sort of witnessed with him and people is that he really placed a lot of value on sort of entrepreneurship, that founder energy. And so even for me, he put me in a position that I didn't deserve to be in. But he saw some of that like founder DNA and gave me an opportunity to punch above my weight class. And I either would have or wouldn't have.
Sure.
But it's like recognizing that I think also is super
But he
important.
must have recognized the talent in you to think, I can see where Alex can go, even if you can't probably, I can force him into that mode by just putting him in that mode and getting him out of his comfort zone.
Or it was a terrible moment of poor taste and discretion. Who knows?
And you were there for 3 years on the kind of
3.5.
3.5.
Yeah. And actually, to the point you made this comment on like earnout. The earnout ended much earlier than that, so I didn't stay for the earnout. I stayed for the learnings. I was really learning a lot, and I really enjoyed it there.
Yeah, right. And then touching on kind of growth, personal growth, you're a very sentient being, Alex, and you're always curious and you're always intrigued by learning. What do you do for personal growth away from work, let's say?
Yeah, I read a lot. I listen to a bunch of podcasts. Podcasts are pick some podcasts. I think they're quite good. And I think that actually, really interestingly, and I don't know if you've done this, Matey, I wouldn't be surprised if you have, but ChatGPT with voice has become really, really brilliant. In fact, on my iPhone, I've reprogrammed the new iPhone, the side button, where when I push it, it triggers right into ChatGPT voice. And you can ask it about any topic. You could ask it about, the Roman Empire, and it'll start telling you a story, and you could interrupt it and ask it to go down a different, like the learning mechanism of being able to have an interactive verbal conversation with ChatGPT to learn about a topic it's actually unbelievable.
Yeah.
I highly encourage you, if you haven't done it, to try and sort of people listening to do that. And then I try to meet with, I guess the incredible part of the job, I think the best part of the job of venture capital is you're always meeting new people. And if you're inherently curious, like if you have intellectual ADD, you're always learning. And that I absolutely love. And so, that's kind of how I keep trying to grow. And then I do a bunch of stuff, as you know, on the health side. Sure. I think in order to show up and be at peak performance, you've got to be sort of foundationally at peak health, physically and mentally and emotionally. And so I focused a lot on that, and that energy I get from just spending time with family, from working out, from eating healthy, from drinking a good wine, as you know.
Last night, especially.
Exactly.
And on that kind of ChatGPT theme, obviously a hot topic today is AI and how we're already seeing the benefits and as that creeps into our lives at a quicker pace. Where do you see, what's your thoughts on it? Is it going to change the world? Is it going to be beneficial? Is it going to put us out of a job? What's going to happen? Because especially being as you're in the tech space specifically, you're and we're sitting in California. So I'd just be really interested to see what your take on it is.
I think that AI is the most important technological wave that I've ever seen. Now, in order for AI to have the impact that it's having today and will have in the future, there's a lot of underpinnings that had to occur before, like the internet. If there was no internet, we wouldn't, there would be no AI. So like the internet was, if you had asked me prior to that, what was the biggest technological innovation that I'd sort of witnessed, that would be the internet. And then you had the movement to cloud, interesting, but, also important, and then you had mobile, very important, but AI, I think, is really fundamental and will change the world in so many different ways. And we are still in the first inning. As you can see, as you move up the rungs on a ladder of AI capability, even from ChatGPT, 2 years ago, 3.5 to 4 to 4 or 5, like the opportunity and capability that is unlocked at every single one of those rungs is almost unfathomable. And I think you're going to see, real significant implications to the world. Some are going to be incredible. I believe we have a real chance to find, cures for diseases that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to, leveraging AI. Cancer is an example.
Yeah.
I think we'll be able to, leveraging AI, find out ways to produce food at a much grander scale, nutritious food at a much grander scale at a dramatically lower cost. Those are just examples of, I think, the net benefit that I think AI will bring to the world. You'll be able to have access to, all the world's information through a dialogue and be able to learn about anything that you want to learn about. Like, information is power, as you know, and everyone will have access to as much as they are curious. So they want to go deep on learning about anything. And I think that's incredible. You'll see AI at the end, see the intersection of AI and hardware. So self-driving cars will reduce the number of deaths dramatically.
Yeah.
And, we're starting to see traffic jams, like all these things cities will be replotted because you won't need all these parking garages and all these other things. Like, there's so many implications of AI with hardware, robotics, right? Tesla's working on, I think it's called Optimus, which is their robot, which I think in 5 to 10 years, you'll be able to have a robot that, kind of a humanoid form, like from the movie iRobot, that's doing a bunch of things, including dangerous jobs.
Yeah.
That humans shouldn't be doing. That could be incredible. So that's all the good stuff. You play it forward and, you play the robot theme forward and it's Terminator. And these, AI becomes smarter than we are, learns at a much faster rate, develops its own, sort of awareness of self, and then, wipes out the human race.
Let's hope not in our lifetime.
I hope not. But like, that's the, with anything that's good, there's a side effect that comes along.
Sure.
And then the question is, like, what is that side effect? And does it outweigh, the good? I would argue social media, as an example, has had a lot of positive benefit. I would, at this point, almost argue social media has been net negative for the world.
Right.
So, who knows how AI plays out? We're still early.
Yeah. And do you think people should, we're going to have to embrace it because it's not going to stop, is it?
It's not.
Is the genie's out the bottle or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And for those who think I'm going to be out of a job, it's really about looking at where you can add more value, and the iterative tasks, let's say, you can then deploy to AI to do. So you should get more time back, more creative thought, the ability to get forward quicker.
Yeah, I think that's right. Go back to the Industrial Revolution. Everybody feared that, we were going to lose all these jobs to, factories and automation. And it was true, but look at the benefit of the Industrial Revolution that it had on sort of, humankind. I think the slight difference now is, even during the Industrial Revolution, it took longer for it to take effect. AI is moving at such an incredibly rapid pace, and is actually doing the job of a lot of what people have to do today, whether it's in customer service or whether it's the entry legal person or the entry sort of accounting. AI is doing that already, and it's only accelerating.
Sure. So
that dislocation of jobs, I think, is going to happen faster this time around, certainly, than it did in the Industrial Revolution. I think AI is going to touch more of the workforce.
Yeah, almost white collar versus blue collar.
Exactly. And then so the question becomes, what do we do about that? And how do we make sure that people have an opportunity to still earn a living and, lead a good life? I think humans probably weren't born onto this planet to work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week for the entirety of their life. And if you could sort of liberate them from that time, it's like enjoy other things, like enjoy life, grow, read, spend time with family. Yeah. That would be amazing. The question is, like, how do you enable them to be able to afford to do that? And that's, I think, something we're going to have to solve down the road. And I don't know if that's basic income or, some other solution, but we're going to have to figure something out.
Because someone was describing to me how if a lot of the cost in a product is people related, be it staff to make it, back office people to invoice that product, get paid for it. if you can democratize that in a way where you reduce that overhead, cost of goods will come down. Yeah. So will we move to a society where things are a lot cheaper, but then, so you don't need as much money to drive your life, so you've got more time to go and spend with your family, but then you also run the risk that you may not be needed in that job anymore.
Yeah.
So do you then retrain, and do you go from being an engineer to a teacher or an astronaut or whatever it might be?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like I said, it's still really...
It's exciting, right?
It is exciting. Like the thing that we talk about in venture is that we believe people in venture are starting to talk about this idea that in the next couple of years, we're going to see companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and, billions of dollars of enterprise value be built with 20 people or less. And that's never been possible, right? Like there's almost like not necessarily a linear scale, but a high correlation between being able to grow revenue and enterprise value with how many humans you hired to be able to do that, to your point.
Yeah.
And I think because of AI, that will be meaningfully disconnected. Like I already see in startups, AI writing a lot of the code that otherwise engineers would have had to.
Which means their cost base must come right down, right?
Cost base comes out. AI is writing a lot of the marketing content that people had to do before. That's coming down, and the content's better.
Yes.
AI is creating like the visual imagery that you need to take your product to market, whether it's the packaging or the positioning or the ads. That's cost is coming down. AI is doing the customer service. You need fewer people to support customers who have like all of that.
Yeah.
So again, it's a fascinating time.
And just to close off, Alex, for those who are on their entrepreneurial journey, what's one piece of advice you'd give someone who's on that road today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot that come to mind and a lot that I've been given. I mean, I think the biggest thing, sort of just comes down to don't give up. There's so many tough times in a founder journey, and sometimes surviving and figuring the thing out is what leads to a great outcome. There's so many examples of companies that were, kind of wandering the desert for a couple of years and didn't have a breakout success, but survived and were always open-minded and curious and learning and iterating very quickly, and then landed on something, and that became the thing that created an incredible trajectory in a big company. And so, I guess I would say stay curious, stay open-minded, iterate fast, be uber decisive, and just keep going.
Yeah. And make sure you've got the fuck you.
Yeah, make sure you've got the fuck you. That's right.
Alex, thanks for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. You are a true maverick. You've really highlighted some great thinking points. And certainly your journey's made you into a very insightful person. And I'm sure everyone around is learning from that all the time. And you've still got that curiosity to learn. So thanks again. And we'll have a glass of wine soon.
Thanks, matey.
See ya.